Hello and welcome to the Kim Iversen Show. Thank you so much for being here. So tonight we're sitting down with Dr. Ron Paul. He is a former congressman from Texas, former presidential candidate, and really the inspiration behind the modern Libertarian Party. He also co-hosts the Ron Paul Liberty Report along with Daniel McAdams. Dr. Ron Paul, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's really nice chatting with you and seeing you.
Kim, it's nice to be with you.
We are both going to be at the Rage Against the War Machine rally this Sunday in Washington, D.C. We're going to both be speaking alongside many others. We are in, I feel like, really tense times. We're on the brink of what feels like World War III. Is this the most intense time period in your lifetime? Right at the, is this what it feels like going right into a big war? Or do you think we could back this down?
Well, I think we can, and we should, because it wouldn't be difficult if we had the right people doing the right decision. But right now, we don't have that available to us. No, I have to admit, I had another experience way back in 1962. I was a medical resident at Henry Ford Hospital, and there was a bit of a crisis in Cuba, and they had the Russians, the Soviets had missiles down there. And within a week, I had a draft notice, draft me out of my residency. So for a few weeks there, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of pins and needles going around. So there was a tense moment. I think I'd have to say at that time that was greater than what we're experiencing now. But I get upset with the whole system continuously because, I see things happening in the United States. We're worrying about a war over there. I am worried about the war against the American people by our own government. So I stay annoyed constantly, and this is just another episode. And I'm convinced that if you could wave a wand and get rid of the people who like war and part of the military-industrial complex, and get rid of that element, we could get through this easily. But it would mean this is the most immediate thing we do, during the campaign, before the presidential campaign, and we were in the Middle East war. And I said, just bring the troops home. We just marched in, just march out. And I think that's it. But I'd like to add now, just don't march in. Then we wouldn't have these kind of problems.
Yeah, where do you think all of this stems from? I mean, we just seem to have this growing military-industrial complex. The budget never ceases to increase. It does feel like people, we elect people that go off to Washington who say they want to end these wars, or they want to refunnel the money towards other programs, or eliminate this sort of funding in general because the budget is too bloated. But then when they get there, they just seem to fall in line. Is it groupthink that is causing this? Are there outside forces that are pressuring them? I mean, where is this? Why can we cease? We just never seem to be able to end this.
Well, I think there are outside forces which stir up the fear and the desire to, do something about it. But I think ultimately, though, governments reflect what the people are thinking. The people were complacent and went along and didn't complain and listened to the fear mongers, and they went along with COVID. Even the doctors did. It was atrocious. And but when the people woke up, which happened to a large degree, and said, enough is enough, let's not do this. That was what we witnessed in the 60s. The war, there was a lingering, and 60,000 Americans get killed. And finally, the streets woke up here. And I think one of the things we're trying to do this Sunday is wake up people before we get to that point, because I think instincts are good. I think there's some hints right now that the people are shifting in our direction. And I think that is good. But the people have to wake up. And, when it comes to spending, the people want the spending. How many people work in the military-industrial complex? How many people get checks from the government? It goes on and on. So people might say, yeah, Ron, I think you're right. But for right now, we have to do this and we have to clean up this mess, which means we have to suffer through deficit. We have a virus to destroy. So therefore, we need $2 trillion more here in the next year. So they always have to build up the fear. And then the people respond by saying, well, if you need the money, we just have to do it. But right now, I think we're starting to witness that the people are catching on a little sooner this time. That's why I'm keeping my fingers crossed to be hopeful that we might be able to stir up more support come this Sunday.
I mean, I'm hopeful as well. But then at the same time, I feel like a lot of the voices that have been against funding for Ukraine, all this endless funding, the minute you bring up China, it just seems like suddenly they're like, oh, but China. And that does seem to be the mentality. Like you brought up the virus. It was like, oh, but the virus. And now it's, oh, but Russia. And then soon it's going to be, oh, but China. So it does seem like they're able to figure out the button to push, right, to get people to go along with it. It's never ending.
That's right. But I can go one step further. Even if you recognize that and try to modify all the false propaganda noise about China, that when things are going on in the world constantly, and when you think about the deep state and the invisible governments, I don't think we shouldn't think that we're dealing with a government that's going to be responsive in many ways, because when push comes to shove, whether it's the CIA that is not monitored or whether it's the Federal Reserve, you could fund anything and it's all in secret. You could bail out governments and all kinds of warring factions around the world. So the problem is very, very big. On the short run is about all we can do is argue the case. Enough is enough. Shift your gears. Let's go in a different direction. And right now, I think you're absolutely right. People are careless. They say, oh yeah, I think we're against what we're doing in Ukraine, but we have to concentrate on China. Well, I think that is a lot of noise, but it's still a reflection of an attitude that's been perpetuated in mainstream media, our universities, our government, and it's been around for a long time. So ultimately, what changed what we were living with before our revolution was, there was a tyranny controlling us. But finally, the Jeffersonians came along and said, there's a better way. And things changed. So I think right now we're at a stage where we definitely need a change in direction. But the most we can do on the immediate in immediate point is just shift gears in the reverse and get rid of this. And that's why I think that this wake up with the COVID is very beneficial to show that people can wake up. They woke up over Vietnam way too late. And even though we don't have the solution just by snapping our finger, I think we just have to put the message out there, because I do believe the majority of the people are with us.
Yeah, one of the tough things that's going on around the rally this Sunday is that there's just a lot of people who are unwilling to coalesce with certain other people. We're seeing this drama sort of play out with this rally where you've got even Medea Benjamin, who's one of the most anti-war activists out there with Code Pink. She's been told by Code Pink, asked don't speak because we don't want you on the same stage as so-and-so. Or people are boycotting or essentially saying, I just cannot, I cannot agree with this person on certain things. And so therefore, this whole thing is just a sham. And that seems to be the big demise. If American people can't put their differences aside to coalesce for one thing, how can we possibly make change? War, especially when it comes to war, I mean, this is killing people. Literally, people are dying. And there are people that are essentially saying, yeah, but my hatred for this particular speaker is greater than my hatred for a mother having to hold her dead child in their arms. That doesn't make any sense. Yet that is what we're sort of up against when it comes to trying to coalesce. So I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I do agree with you. I think people are changing their minds and they're starting to say, hey, we're spending endless money. But then at the same time, they just get blinded by certain emotions hatred for certain people or groups, or their rabid war hawkishness against China. It just seems like the only way that we're really going to ever affect actual change and stop being a warmongering country is unfortunately the same way that many other empires that were similar, the way that they ended it, which was either they went completely bankrupt and their societies crumbled, or they were defeated by another military. I mean, which one do you think is more likely?
Well, I think we have to realize and be realistic to know that waving a wand is not going to happen. And so I think it's an attitude. I spend as much time over outside of medicine trying to change the educational system than I do it just in pure politics. But when I was in Washington, I still believed in what we're trying to do this weekend. And for instance, Dennis Kucinich is a very good friend, and I think he's going to be there Sunday. So, yeah, you say, well, Dennis, that doesn't mean the majority of the Democrats come over. But we did, have some inroads and talk to people. But somebody said, how did you put up with it? You're not getting results, and you got to move faster. And I said, well, it never bothered me too much. I just didn't have a high expectation. But if I got one little thing, people would come, and I think there has been a shift. It's never fast enough. I think on the issue of war, it's been matter of fact, more difficult than calling attention to the insanities of the Federal Reserve System. People talk about it now and know about it, and it's self-destructing right now. Our foreign policy will. So you indicate that, yes, how will it end? Like all empires end the same way. They finally collapse because there's too much attention in foreign affairs. And that may be the way it ends. Well, why are you wasting your time if it's going to end like that? So that we can help to rebuild it. Because that's the big issue now, because I don't believe we're going to have an election where we're going to have the majority in the Congress of libertarians and constitutionalists. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't find one person here and one person there and work on your kids and your educational system. I have a homeschooling program, and that's the way the world works. And we have seen positive things happen, eventually that can happen. I do know one thing: if we do zero and try to hide in a corner, they have too many guns and too many CIA agents and too much surveillance that they know everything that we do. So I think the best thing is you get out front and don't have high expectations. I've always been pleased that it seems like I got more attention than I ever dreamed of, because I never expected to be elected to Congress. That was one thing. And people do pay attention. And even now, I think of the people that I meet along the way, and they're excited about what's happening. Well, I started this group and this group just in the last 20 years, that the things that's happened that I barely knew about, but had a little bit to do with it. So I think it's there. But why do you do it? Because that's the only thing I know that could do it in a peaceful manner.
Yeah, I mean, we have to speak up. I mean, we have to do something about it. We have to at least try. I mean, even if the machine is much greater than our might, we have to at least try to stop it and warn and say, listen, this is where we're headed. We're headed for doom. I mean, all of these people, I find it so ironic that so many people in Washington who are, China, 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 they're coming after us. And they don't realize that by them constantly going after China, blowing up balloons in the sky, just doing crazy stuff, that is actually speeding up the demise of our own nation, that is how we end up collapsing as an empire, is by wasting all of this money, putting all our resources towards this, where I don't think I don't think they're the military threat. Economically, I think that's what we should be paying attention to, is how do we compete in the global world economically? How do we produce? How do we have exports? How do we compete in that way? And yet instead, we're just trying to go around and flex muscles and say, don't you dare try to surpass us. We're the biggest country. Don't you dare try to somehow rise up. and overtake us. And so it's really one of those. What are your thoughts on China? Do you think China is a threat?
Not really. I think it's a threat to our ego because they sell us more stuff than we can sell them. And they say, see, it's the Chinese doing it. Well, maybe it has to do with our monetary system. Our export is paper money, fiat money. And we have still, deceived the world into believing it is the best reserve currency ever. Well, it has been and it's still working, but it'll quit working. So we deceive them into taking paper and sending us all that stuff. They end up with our money. They don't want to keep it. So they invest it. They invest it in Africa and different places, and they're internationally they're more capitalistic than we are. And yet we claim we own the world, but we own it with militarism. When we waste all our money, we don't even know where it goes. We don't even know how to audit the money we spend, so we're bankrupting ourselves. So that's just bad economic policies. But I remember in high school was when we were fighting China and in the Korean War. And I had a teacher that was redrafted after World War II. He went over there and was killed. And that had a big impact on me. So, but then as the Cold War was ending, and one of the most unpopular presidents ever, Nixon and Kissinger as the aide, they said, well, I'm going to sneak over there and we're going to talk about, a different type of a program. And of course, there was a lot of discussion about it, and still is. And I remember talking to some people that were involved in investment, and they were so excited. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when we open up our market to China? It's going to be wonderful. And it was to a large degree. And guess what? The amount of trade still going on with China is fantastic, except, the way the First Amendment has been abused. Getting that information out, if you go out there now and go in Washington, if I was there and gave a special order on why we shouldn't be so militant toward China, that would be treasonous. But it's the control of the First Amendment, just like in COVID. The control was by the government. Oh well, we protect it. It's our friends in the corporate world, in the pharmaceutical industry. They will put the pressure on, and they'll enforce all this garbage, but and then punish the people for not following the government's rules. And wouldn't admit what they have done to us right now is limit the First Amendment. That's why shows like yours is just wonderful that we can still do this. And I thought the internet was wonderful until I still do, until I realized that it's very restrictive. But ideas, I keep telling myself, ideas cannot be stopped. Because a good idea, an army can't even stop a good idea. It spreads even without a internet or whatever. The method of changing ideas, and it's happened. It's been up and down. I think our revolutionary period of time in the Enlightenment was fantastic. Of course, we've just about canceled that out. We've canceled out not only a few people in the medical field and people who stood up against this nonsense. We've canceled out the 20th century. And we've reversed ourselves to some of the conditions we had way back at the beginning of the last century. And that's where the problem is. It's internal. It's not China. It's internal. And then it's the money control. And I think we've been engulfed with. People say, well, they're communists and they're socialists and all this. And I think realistically, you can get further along by talking about corporatism. It's the corporations that control it, whether it's the military corporations, the pharmaceuticals corporations, but they're a hand of the government. So it's corporatism that is our real enemy, because they've been able to eliminate the First Amendment.
Now let's talk about big tech a little bit, because this is where things get a little fascinating. And I think especially for you as a libertarian. I'm not a libertarian. I definitely have a lot of libertarian tendencies, especially when it comes to social issues. I'm very live and let live. I definitely want less government intrusion when it comes to surveillance. Would like to abolish many of the same things. So I definitely definitely share a lot of viewpoints. But when it comes to big tech, this is where I have a bit of a beef, right? Because I love your son in the Senate. He's one of my favorite senators, but I'm always like, come on, Rand, this is the one thing. He'll say big tech is limiting speech. They're censoring people. We know that they're doing all of these things that are hindering the First Amendment. Yet when it comes to what do we do about it, that's the big question. As a libertarian, the answer is often, well, we don't want to regulate them.
Yeah,
but don't you think there should be some regulation?
You've conveniently divided. Yeah, but you've divided the two. You have big tech here and the government's over here, but they're like this. They're locked together, and it's big tech that and government that are partners, and it's the tech that the government will influence, say, big tech, and vice versa. So it's if you had total separation, if you canceled all the interactions, which usually involves great finances between the, whether it's the military industrial complex or big tech. Big tech gets a tremendous amount of benefit from the government. And now they get permission to do things, and they don't get blamed for violating our First Amendment. So it's a misunderstanding of this separation, I think, is the problem. I think that it has to be literally separated. We have to have a separation, and it isn't separation. The big tech is just nothing more than the arm of a secret government, which is the CIA, who build these wars. So if we don't see that, they're still going to continue. If you don't separate the financial interrelationship of big tech and the government, we're not going to solve the problem, because you don't have to limit anything on big tech except limiting the money that comes from them, of the advantages or regulations, and they have the advantages of government protection. Well, how does a pharmaceutical company? They get exempt from liability. So they're not separate. They're part of the government, and the government isn't us as much as it is, a secret government, and that's who runs our foreign policy. We cannot we don't have any idea what the CIA is doing all the time. And our special forces, we don't even know where they are. And this is the problem. It isn't so much that you want to put on more regulations on the tech or something. The companies. You can't regulate the speeches. That is not it. You regulate the special deals that they get. And social media gets a lot of special deals. We don't want to limit what they say and do. It should be more like a newspaper. We can't have monitors and all of this. But if you get the government out of the way, believe me, it would be dealt with by property and voluntarism and contracts. And that is what we don't have. And that would be the libertarian message that would really go a long way in solving these problems.
No, I agree with you that definitely the government has been influencing big tech. I mean, we see them cart them into Congress, question them, pressure them, essentially threaten them with regulation if they don't behave, and get rid of all that misinformation and disinformation. I mean, they definitely have been playing a big hand in pressuring these companies when you look at the actual product that they offer, they don't really have an incentive to censor people, because the more people they've got on their platform and the more they've got, the more engagement, the better it is for them and their business model. But, just like you brought it back in the beginning, saying that you believe that it's the people that are feeling these pro-war sentiments that are driving we have to support Ukraine, or we have to do endless this, that, and the other. It's the people and their genuine feelings. And yes, those feelings are shifting, but that's where it really comes from. Then, you've got all these liberals, let's say, running big tech. And so it would be in their political feeling and their emotional feeling to then want to censor and censor people when they offer a product. Don't you think there should be a control on that?
Yes, but it should be the marketplace that controls it. If you it used to be easier for us to think about this with a newspaper. They had an editorial section and they reported the news, and objective journalism was rewarded, and people bought newspapers. And then finally, that got messed up, so people quit buying newspapers. But you didn't back then. We didn't advocate government regulations on editorials and the news. We had more honorable people. Our founder said, if you don't have a moral people, this experiment, it doesn't work. But what are they doing now in our journalism schools? They're teaching nihilism. They say you can't know the truth. There is no truth. So what they're saying is you can lie all you want, and objectivity is wrong. It's evil. And then this is a philosophic problem. And if you do this, they think that if you are objective, it hurts the social justice system. How can you be just with everybody, and how can you control everything for this total socialism if you have objectivity? They're literally admitting the truth hurts, so they have to become nihilistic and make that their religion, that lying is okay. They actually believe this. That's why everybody lies. You hear people at the CIA saying, well, we were taught that at school. We were taught how to lie, cheat, steal, and kill, and then laugh about it. And so it's that attitude. It's a philosophic attitude. It's a moral attitude too. We're financially bankrupt, but we're morally bankrupt too. So we're not going to tinker around with a few regulations that's going to correct that. It's a much deeper problem.
Yeah, speaking of the CIA, we've there's more evidence coming out that looks like they did off a sitting American president, that they were behind that. They're meddling all around the world. They are really, truly an institution that needs to go away. We have to get rid of the CIA. I think many of us feel this way. Not enough of us feel this way. But what are the chances we're actually going to get rid of the CIA? And if they said, okay, fine, we're going to get rid of the CIA, I would imagine they would just reorganize it, rename it, rebrand it. And it's the same thing. It's just under a different label so that we got rid of the CIA. But I mean, what are the real chances? Who is going to even take that on? I mean, if they could potentially take out a sitting president, who's going to take on the CIA?
Well, you heard what Schumer said to Trump and warned him, don't take on the CIA and security forces, because they know how to get you. So yeah, that was Schumer's bluntness, and he was right. No, I think that's right. But there are a few of us that would. I mean, frequently, and I continue to say, you get rid of the CIA. We just marched in, just march home, go home, mind our own business. And one thing you could do, you were talking about changing names. I think a name change that should happen is we shouldn't have a DOD, a Department of Defense. Right. That's when we really got into trouble, because we have to defend ourselves, and to defend ourselves we have to defend the world. What we need is a Department of War. If somebody attacks us and it's declared war, then you have to deal with it, because we believe in national defense. But no, as long as you have a Department of War, they want to be busy. Bureaucrats have to be busy. And now look at the industry they have, the military-industrial complex. So it's a psychology, a philosophic position that they have. So there's a lot that has to do, but it's not that complicated. We're not going to get rid of it. We're not going to get rid of the CIA. It just is not going to happen. We're not going to balance the budget. And but what we will have is a liquidation of debt. There will be a default. The default is already started. It is called inflation. That is right. Mean the government steals from you and ruins the money, so we're in default. But no, it's not going to change by election, but sentiment by the people. Some of the positive things that has happened under COVID, it was a movement, but there wasn't a election that changed it, even though it has led to some changes at school boards, which is very good. But the attitude of the people is always reflected in the type of government we have.
What type of role do you think the U.S. should play in the world? I mean, right now we've got bases all over the place, 800 bases. We're surrounding China. We've been surrounding Russia. We're all over the Middle East. What role, so let's say we were to, in your dream world, let's say we were to just start over. Um, there are going to be people that say, well, but we have to help people. We have to stop genocides. We have to promote democracy, which is really what they use now to kind of to engage in all of these wars, right? Is we're stopping terrorism and we are promoting democracy. Is there a role for that in the U.S.? What would be the role?
Well, we're supposed to, and we could start with Article 1, Section 8. Just look at what the rules say, what the law says, what the founders say. Well, every member of Congress take an oath to uphold. And then they talk about, well, some guy got into Congress and he lied about his resume. He's the worst person in the world. He doesn't qualify for a lot of good things, but they say he's the worst person. He lied on his resume and he won a seat in Congress. Well, I tell you what, the real lying goes when those people in Washington take the oath of office to obey the Constitution, because 90% of everything they do there does not fit the mold of saying, where do you get the authority? How often do they ask that? Where do you get the authority? There's no prohibition in the Congress, so we can do it. That's what the liberals believe. If there's no precise prohibition, then they can do it. But that's not the way it is. There's a precise exception that thou shalt not do this list in Article 1. And then they can't do that. They're not allowed to do it. And yet the opposition flips it and say, well, if there's no prohibition, we can do whatever they want. So they destroy the whole Constitution. But that's what they're taught in school. That's why the only solution to that is separation of education from the government, just as religion is supposed to be separate from the government. Until we separate the educational system. Do you think Thomas Jefferson went to a government school? And he was probably one of the most educated people ever. He wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was 33 years old, and he was basically homeschooled. But
what does that look like?
What my answer is just look to the Constitution. You can get started. If we can't do that, we don't have much hope.
Right. And I understand your point that it does. I mean, an educated society is really the way we correct a lot of these problems, right? I mean, even just an informed society. And a lot of times they shield us from information. They hide it. Like you said, they lie. So we're not even getting information. But an educated population for sure is, I think, educated and informed. But how do we get there? So if you say that you don't think there should be government schools, what would that look like? So would all children, I mean, not everybody can homeschool their kids. They have to work.
Well, I'd advise somebody like that of an individual campus, why don't you get an interview program on television or on the radio? I've heard of people doing that. What you're doing, Kim, is just great. How many people do you have no idea how many people you reach. That's the magnificent thing about this is you say, well, I had 10,000 listeners the other day. Doesn't matter. What did those 10,000 people do? There's a remnant of people out there, and ideas are not stopped, and it's out there, and things do change. They come in cycles, and that's all you can do unless you decide, well, no, we have to blow up the place, and we believe in violence, which the libertarians obviously don't, and constitutionalists generally do not. But I think that I think the education and what should you do? The best thing now is the biggest thing to do is teach people about what the First Amendment is. When I left Congress, I gave a little dissertation on what I thought about Congress and all. And I said the most important thing is that we preserve the First Amendment. If you get thrown off the air, how many people aren't going to hear your message? So this is it, and it's not like. And even if you don't have a radio program or can't do anything, there's ways of spreading messages, and sometimes it's just one-on-one. When I decided to speak out, I was upset about what was happening to the monetary system, and all I thought I was doing. When my wife said, "What are you doing this for?" and I said, "I just want to get it off my chest." She says, well, you might get elected. I said, no, I'm not going to get elected. She says, well, she says you're going to get elected because you're going to be telling the truth, and people want to hear the truth. And I said, no, and I said, they won't vote for somebody that wants to get rid of Santa Claus. So I was wrong.
Yeah. You should always listen to your wife, right? That's the moral of that story. Yeah,
She was right.
curious.
I was wrong.
I do want to talk about this one thing here about it. You brought up accountability and the lack of accountability. Recently, Seymour Hersh has come out with reporting that Joe Biden, the administration, blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, essentially an attack on Russia and Germany, an attack on a NATO ally. Why are Republicans not carting Joe Biden through and saying we're impeaching you for this? I mean, this is what seems like a declaration of war without declaring war. It's certainly an act of war against a civilian population, actually. So, I mean, why is that not getting any attention? And also, why is the papers from the CIA showing that they likely had a hand in the killing of a sitting president? Why are these just being glazed over by the American population as meh, no big deal? Government does what government does.
Well, we just need more people listening to your program, and we need more people coming to the Liberty Report, and more people would be informed. But it's a little bit more complicated, I guess, for people to understand. And you mentioned Germany. Germany, that is the strangest thing in the world. It hurt Germany than anybody else.
Right.
And here the marketplace teaches what you want is free market and free exchange. And it was wonderful. At the end of the Cold War, Russia has all these minerals. They have oil. They built a pipeline, which is fantastic, all the way from Russia to Germany. So Germany participates in blowing it up. It's insane. And but who really was behind it? Which is we have a greater personal responsibility. And I felt that personal responsibility as a member of Congress is that we have this responsibility, and the CIA is involved, and it wasn't done with the knowledge of the Congress. It's total anarchy, and it's deep state, and it's secret government, and there has been a coup, and it's long lasting, it's slow and insidious, and it continues. And I think the real dramatic increase in the control and the expansion of the coup was in 1963 with the assassination of a president and assassination of Martin Luther King, assassination of Senator Kennedy, on and on. And that was all secret. That was the CIA stuff. So that has to be handled. We have to get it. That's why information is the most important thing that we can do. And don't worry about if you have a meeting and 5 people show up, you don't have to worry about it. Those 5 people might talk to 50 people each. Who knows what will happen? If you're speaking the truth, they cannot stop it.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Ron Paul, thank you so much for being on the show today. Looking really forward to talking to you, to seeing you Sunday and hearing you at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Hoping a lot of people come out to that, hoping that we make our voices heard, that we want to end this senseless warmongering that the United States is engaged in. And a lot of people are trying to make it about, oh, well, yeah, but Russia's the one. And it's, look, I'm not a Russian citizen. I don't deal with their, I'm an American. I pay American taxes. All I can care about, my voice has got to be used, is to try to change my government, something I have more control over. I don't have control over any other government in the world, but I maybe have some control over the U.S. government. And that's really what it's about. So we've got to get out there, and we have to try to put an end to this so that we don't end up a collapsed empire, which is looking like that's exactly where we're headed if we don't stop. So thank you so much for joining us. And I always look forward to watching your program. And I'll certainly look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Kim, thanks for having me.
Thank you.